Professor David Rowe from the University of Sydney has been exploring the shift of the status of sport in Australia since the Sydney Olympics, and he joins us now on Weekend Breakfast. Professor Rowe, how have our poor recent showings affected our cultural identity?
Well, I suppose it's a bit of a blow, you might say, given that, if you look at a whole series of official documents about Australia, including the advice on citizenship, which goes to people who are going to take the citizenship test. It tells you that sport is very important in Australia, that Australia's sporting performance is very important, essentially for the status of the nation. So, to some degree you could argue that, well, if Australian sport's in trouble, then sort of by extension that maybe there's something of a crisis in Australian national culture if you fix your sporting performance to your national culture.
And is there?
Well, I think you'll pick up some, yes, a fair bit of angst. I think you'd have noticed. For example, the two reports into Australian swimming post-Olympics have made clear that there's a cultural problem and almost an intergenerational problem that young folks don't perhaps quite get it. They don't quite see what a revered institution sport is in Australia. They're out for themselves, essentially. So there's a lot of, I think, hand-wringing, I suppose. But it's for some people it's a very serious matter. For some, it's not so serious.
Is that a generational thing, though? For the older generations, it does matter because that's the way they were brought up. But very much an Anglo-centric way of looking at the world as well in Australia. Whereas the younger generations, it's more multicultural. Perhaps there's a less of a feel for that.
I think there's a definite change that's going on. New populations moving into Australia. I'm doing some research in Greater Western Sydney at the moment, and I'm specifically looking at this issue. Does sport mean the same thing to people from China or India or other places?
Well, it's interesting because that's also the place where we're seeing new sporting teams being created at the moment.
Well, that's dead right. So they are kind of joining the World Sporting Club. Quite clearly, because sport for those countries also is an important sort of signifier, a symbol of national identity. We've recently seen Tokyo was announced as to host the Olympic Games after Brazil, and we all might think back to 1964 when Tokyo held the Olympics for the first time post-war. It was a way of saying that it was back into the community of nations.
And in the past, sport has very much defined Australian masculinity. But where do women fit into the picture now?
Well, with great difficulty in many cases. I think especially because if you take a very nationalistic approach to sport, it's often kind of connected with war in many ways. There's this kind of masculine notion of almost sort of defending the nation, and women often find it difficult to kind of fit in there somewhere in the major symbols, the Anzac tradition and that kind of thing. It's always connected closely with images of war. So, and of course they don't get paid anywhere near as much, and they don't get as much media coverage or sponsorship. So it is rather hard, I think, for women. So, but I guess that the upside of that is that it's less of an identity crisis for women than it is for men.
Professor David Rowe from the University of Western Sydney, thanks very much.
Great pleasure, thank you.